So we've learned at Computex that there's a lot of pressure on factories right now, and this is something we're doing a follow-up on, actually interviewing a bunch of the companies. At ID Cooling, we were just speaking with someone who works here about factories moving more inland and the pressures they're facing because of the sales drop in the industry. And so really interesting, because on the product side, you start to see it materialize as well, where the brands that want to stay aggressive right now when sales are down, like we covered in our collapse documentary, they have to attack it from both a cost cutting and an investment side, which is like an impossible challenge. So ID Cooling, we'll have a discussion with them after the show with a bunch of other companies as well. In terms of product side, they have an $18 air cooler. So this is a SE214 XT. This we've already reviewed. This is a G2 model. They've updated a little bit, mostly on the look side. And for example, doing the zip fin on the side here. We'll come back to this, but $18 is the floor now for a cooler from ID Cooling. Closest competition, obviously going to be Thermalright. I think it's the Assassin Spirit has typically been kind of in that same price category. These two companies, they bounce between, like when they're on sale, it's 14 bucks or something, you know, and when it's not, it's 18. So anyway, they have that. We'll also be talking about the Frozn A620 SLK. This we reviewed previously. The larger version of this, the A720, did overall well in our testing a couple years ago. The A620 also did okay. This kind of came in when Deep Cool was getting kicked out of the US market, and the Frozn A620, A720 kind of took over the spots that Deep Cool used to occupy. On the case side, which we're going to get into detail on as well. So this case, they're doing a walnut wood accent on the front panel, and then internally it includes fans that have this vinyl wood, so this is not real. The front panel is, but this is basically a vinyl sticker on the fans. So we'll come back to this as well. On the liquid cooler side, so they have at the high end a $200 DL360 curve, which this has got the curved screen. So you've seen some Trikes panorama influence here, which everyone's doing that now. But $200, I think, is kind of where they're trying to attack this. It's, you know, this is, you're going to see this a lot at the show, where it's like brands they're diverging. You're going to have a lot of low end in terms of price, and a lot of high end in terms of price. ID Cooling is one of the ones that's targeting, really fiercely competing in the budget class. Over here, the FX360 Pro, we reviewed a prior version of this. It actually did pretty well in our testing. So this is a $65 cooler. So those are their two extremes, 65 to 200 bucks, down to 18 on the air coolers. They've got some like Threadripper coolers and workstation solutions as well, like a dual CPU, single radiator liquid cooler. So we'll get into it, but we're going to start with the case. Before that, this video is brought to you by Thermaltake and the TR200 WS Micro Chassis, a micro-ATX stout case. It includes an optional 5¼ bay for either a screened or 5¼ drives. The case has a highly perforated side panel, a color accent front styled like other popular cases, can fit radiators and closed-loop liquid coolers in the top, up to 360mm claimed support, and a total of 7 120mm fan mounting locations between the top, bottom, and rear of the case. Max CPU tower cooler clearance is claimed at 175mm and GPU clearance at 365mm. The chassis provides a portable, highly compatible box for your builds. Learn more at the link in the description below. One of the big trends you're going to see coming out of Computex is a lot of the companies moving towards more micro-ATX. So this has been talked about to death over the years. It's always the year of micro-ATX. It never happens. This time there's actual like sales figures that start to illustrate. It's not just cope anymore. It's no longer copium and hopes and dreams. There are actual sales numbers showing a move towards micro-ATX. I think part of that is probably cost, where end users can help bring down the total price to buy into the system. Obviously, you don't need all the space in ATX. We like ATX cases a lot, but micro is finally getting some time to shine, I guess, for the show. So with that being one of the trends, this is probably very familiar to some of you who know micro-ATX. You might recognize it as being related to, in some ways, something like the XTM, I think it's called, from Fantex. Antec has kind of a variation, Asus has a variation. So this is not new tooling. This is tooling that exists from a factory, and then a bunch of companies will use it or do slight modifications, and that's how they target a lower price, basically. So sometimes you'll see a factory supply that supplies the tooling, and it's up to the companies that utilize that to change things like the front panel or the fan spec configuration, do minor tweaks to improve things over the years. But this is not brand new tooling. So they're doing the walnut wood, real wood front panel, and then the internal accents. It includes 3 fans, they're 120s. I think it's gonna be 2 120 fronts, they're by 25, and one 120 by 25 rear. and that's with the vinyl accents on it. And then on the back panel, we'll just pull that off really quick. Very simple. I mean, there's nothing fancy in here. There's a removable magnetic filter on the back side of the case. Kind of typical. You've got decent depth actually for a micro-ATX box. They tend to be pretty good on the width. So okay depth here. Power supply is mounted up top. And actually, if we remove this top dust filter, you'll see exhaust here for the power supply. There's this separate cover plate that they've installed that's basically for looks. And then the cable extension, the pass-through, runs internally here and kicks out the back of the case to where you plug it in. So this is a fairly standard micro-ATX box at this point. The thing ID Cooling is trying to do is go for the wood accents and include a decent amount of fans, and then they're selling it for $80, so for the Flow 500 Air. The only kind of major point I would make, I guess, is this dust filter is not super useful just because you end up with exhaust from the power supply, probably exhaust from maybe a liquid cooler or something, and it's just going to slightly obstruct the flow. So if you're all exhaust on top, you can remove that. But anyway, that is the case, pretty straightforward. The interesting thing internally for components is this, where this is a double-decker radiator tank, basically. This comes down to the end of a 25 millimeter thick fan, so they pull straight across there. The reason they're doing these two tanks, technically, I guess it adds a little more liquid, but then you're subtracting for the tubes. So this is a short tube solution, and the point of this is to install it internally in a build like this one and hide the tubes as much as possible, where you can see instead of running the tubes, snaked over here or something, they're able to just tuck it up and inside of the chamber at the top of the case. So this is something that ID Cooling's been playing around with for about a year now, but they're starting to roll that out in more of their liquid coolers. Let's move on to the air coolers. All right, so for me, my favorite component to cover at shows is normally coolers. This is a Frozn A620 variation, but they've changed a lot on it. So they're calling this sleek. That's what SLK stands for. Basically, the main thing ID Cooling's doing here is, and this is what you're going to see right now in the current market condition, is trying to figure out kind of what's small things we typically wouldn't do because cost, and try to get those in there to just kind of beat other people for what little market share there is. So basically, the fan is pre-installed in here. You can remove it. They're just trying to make it easier to throw this onto a system without needing fan clips or additional rails, things like that. So these two holes just go straight down to screw it into the board, and then the 4 offset staggered screws here are to remove this separate top plate, and then that would reveal the fan. So it's not like you can't get the fan out of there, but they pre-install it. It's an ease of installation thing. I mean, that's really all this is. It's not like magic. It's not some big innovation, but it's an ease of installation improvement. That is the type of thing you're going to see a lot of right now. So this is already out as of like a month or two ago, maybe. It's $50 on Amazon when I checked. 2 fans. It's a 120 by 15 on the front. So this is a thinner fan. That's going to have lower pressure, as in worse pressure performance to push through, which they help compensate with a 25 mil thick internal fan, more standard, to pull the air through the back. It's a press fit for the fins, so they're not soldered. That is a cost-saving side, but press fit's pretty common for this type of cooler. The solder, you don't really see it pick up until the higher end. A unified body that reduces some of the flex, which is also why they do the installation the way they do. And then for the rest, it's a 6 heat pipe setup, 6 millimeters. They're composite heat pipes, so that's going to be sintered copper powder and maybe some other type of technique in there as well. This is just a version with an LCD on it. I think it's like a 5.5 inch LCD for the top of the cooler, 720 by 1280 for the screen resolution. And then moving down the line, there's a lot more coolers, but to me the more interesting ones are maybe the 610 XL, where they're going for a single fan in the front. So this is a thin fan, it's a 15 mil. And their thinking is that if you mount this on top of your CPU cooler, it's deep enough that it's probably going to be right up against the rear exhaust for the case. So effectively, you're getting like a second fan kind of on the tower anyway. And then if you'll notice, it does have a wider fin spacing on this one. So I was looking at that, where the reason to do this is because of that loss of pressure performance on the 15 mil thick fans. It's easier to push it through, wider fin spacing. Basically, if you run too many fins, although it helps with the
sort of the total soak the heatsink can take, it will also hurt with the pressure performance, so you get a lot of resistance on the backside of it. This is a Frozn A620 Turbo. So for this one, they're running a 3,000 RPM fan on the front, and it has this inner ring. I gotta be careful here, but inner ring that's supposed to help with flow guidance. Typically you see these used for straightening the flow. You'll see it on like GPU coolers. Actually, Roman's prototypes, he had some of them. He ended up not going this direction, but that can be used for flow straightening basically. And although we can't convey it in any way through the camera, there is actually, you can feel a difference at the backside. 3,000 RPM is a lot for a fan. So for the coolers overall, the 610 XL is $40. The A620 SLK, is $80. Everything is fine. Nobody has to know, okay? Nobody has to know that happened. ID Cooling's looking the other way right now. They didn't see that. And then this one's $50. Let's move along before I cause an international incident. So then finally on the SE214 XT G2, we've tested these in the past. They're actually pretty okay, the original, not the G2. And $18, the only reason you really buy these coolers is because it's like $1 or two cheaper than whoever their competitor is, I guess, except maybe the top cap, where sometimes you get like this, where they try to clean it up a little bit, put a plastic top cap to hide the heat pipes. There's not really a difference in thermal performance. We've tested like removing or adding it, doesn't really matter. But Thermalright, for example, has some of theirs exposed, some covered. I guess that's kind of one of the main, really, really small, you're scraping the bottom of the barrel at $18. So we'll probably test that one, just because it's nice to have super budget, like cheap coolers on the charts. So other than that, just liquid coolers. So the last one we'll go over, they do have a bunch of liquid coolers. They have some Threadripper stuff. This one's just interesting to me in more detail now because we did test the FX360 Pro and it was one of the better coolers at $60. Our conclusion for that was similar to some of the Thermalright ultra budget, like $60 coolers, which was basically like, on the chart, looks pretty fucking good for the money you spend. What we've never been able to commit to, at least yet, we'll see in a few years, is endurance. I don't know, when they get a certain price, it's hard to know, right, how they're meeting that price. That goes for Thermalright and ID Cooling alike. And so I don't know yet, I haven't seen any gunk problems with the cheap ID Cooling and Thermalright coolers we've tested yet, but it's also only been maybe a year and a half. That tends to really get bad at 2 years plus. So anyway, we're still not sure about that, but this is still on the cheaper side. It looks good, it's a blackout cooler. So they've gone full matte black. This is kind of a trend for ID Cooling. Overall good look, I think. No RGB, cuts cost. Personally, I prefer less RGB anyway. It looks better in my opinion for a lot of the sleeper builds. And then they have increased the microfin area, so it's 33 by 31 millimeters for the internal microfin area, up from 28 by 28. That will help, in theory, significantly with the cooling capabilities. Convex by about 0.1 millimeters. They push it out and down to deform and flatten as you install it with the high pressure. And then the gap and thickness of the fins at 0.1 millimeters, pretty standard, but it is on the smaller side. You can do that with skiving typically. And then the copper base thickness is 0.4 millimeters, $65 for the cooler. And it's called the FX360 Pro 2. They called it blackout. I don't see that on the name card though. So anyway, that one I'm also interested in. So maybe we'll benchmark it. The microfin area is where you're going to get the most improvement, I think, on a cooler like this, other than if they've done anything special with the fans. So that'll wrap it for ID Cooling's booth. We have a really interesting discussion with them on the factory side of things, how the factories are changing their strategy right now, and we'll wrap it up here. We have a ton of coverage for the show up already. Go to the channel for that. Subscribe for more, store.gamersnexus.net to support us directly, or patreon.com/gamersnexus, and we'll see you all next time.